did a radio interview with Roger Phillips a few months ago. And again, you know, somebody said to me he's doing a live phone-in from Walton Prison. And I'd been going into Walton Prison on a regular basis, but that's another story as well. But when I rang up, because everyone was saying about all these people in prison, they were all scum, you know, and so I rang up to say, actually, this is what happened to us. And the prison has been one of the places of the most comfort for me. How odd. Sorry. You wouldn't think that, would you? You know, who would think that going into a prison would be a place of comfort? But for me, I had literally a captive audience. And I was able to share with these men. And I think, how did I get here? And I've been saying that on a weekly basis. God, I am just amazed at the places you've taken me and the people that you've brought along my path to speak to about you. You know, it's just been so wonderful. And again, there are CDs, just to take them if they're useful to you in any way. The prison has been an amazing thing, but as I say, it's another story. But if I might just close with this one last thing, it's to say to you about, really, as I've shared with children and adults, men and women, and all sorts of people, one area seems to always touch people more than anything else. And that's this whole area of forgiveness. It's a huge, huge thing. And for us as Christians, you know, it's great until you have something to forgive. And then you know. And for us, you know, very quickly we decided it was a choice, like the faith and the trust thing. Forgiveness is an act of the will, and it's a choice we make. And we decided very quickly, even on the news item that we did, I remember Mick saying, we bear no malice, and we have forgiven the two men. It turned out 2 men who killed Paul. We forgive them. And I think that's why we have felt the comfort and the healing process so real, because forgiveness was there right away. You know, we've saved ourselves so much heartache from going down that route of bitterness and unforgiveness that would have been so easy to do. And when I went into the prison, it was like meeting the people who'd killed Paul. It was such a hard thing to do. And I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. But when I got there, all I felt was God's love for these men. And it surprised me. I didn't think I would feel that. But I just came out feeling the biggest sinner of all. And realising, maybe for the first time in 42 years as a Christian, God, you saved me from so much. And there, by the grace of God, go I. And I just knew the reality and the depth of what God had done in my life. And I just felt the Lord's love for these men. And so I go in on a regular basis. But when I talk about forgiveness, you can see it blows their mind. And they can't quite grasp it. Some of them have walked out when I've spoken about forgiveness because they can't forgive themselves for what they've done. There was one man who, the chaplain warned me, said, as soon as you mention forgiveness, Jimmy will walk out. And I said, that's fine. It was quite a long walk. And I was able to say what I wanted to say before he got out the door that I knew he'd heard. And I've heard since then, a year later, he has forgiven himself because he said to his family, I don't want you to forgive me. He killed his wife and his family forgave him. But he couldn't, and he didn't want forgiveness. He wanted to punish himself, and he was in such a dark place. But you know, the light of God carries on being active long after we've gone. And before we get there, the Spirit of God is active all the time. He's moving where he will. And we just have to be in the right place at the right time to share the right word with the right person. And then there's fruit. And so from death has come forth much life. From barrenness and emptiness, much fruit to the glory of God. But forgiveness is so important. And I say it because Jesus spoke about it so much, because it was so important. You know, and for some, you know, it's 100% destructive, unforgiveness. It totally eats away. It totally destroys. And I've seen churches close down. I'm not talking about non-Christians, I'm talking about the Lord's people. I've seen churches close down because of unforgiveness. And you don't know who's sitting here. I was at a ladies' meeting a few weeks ago and I was sharing about forgiveness. And it was a week later when she phoned me up, this lady, and she said, I was in that meeting. And she said, my cousin was in the same meeting and we haven't spoken for months. And she said, you know, we realised it was so trivial. And she said, and when you shared about forgiving the man who killed your son, she said, it seemed so inappropriate that what we were doing, you know, it was over some trivial matter. And she said, we're now speaking again and we've put it right. And I thought, that's amazing to me. That's amazing to me. And that's the grace of God. That's the grace of God. You know, we need to forgive. You know, we forgive, but that's human. That's on the one hand. But divine forgiveness is something else. Divine forgiveness is unique to God. Only He can truly forgive. And His forgiveness involves cleansing too. You know, I can't cleanse anyone. I might say that we've forgiven the men who killed Paul. But God's forgiveness is so important because it involves cleansing. If we confess our sin, He is faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's what God does. Not only that, but He wipes it, the offence, He wipes it off the record, which these prisoners understood. He wipes the record clean. As far as the east is from the west, so far as He removed our transgressions from us. So forgiveness is a wonderful thing. And I want to just close, and something to do in the prison which I think is so beautiful, and I hope you don't mind, I've brought some tea light candles here. Just for afterwards, you know. It's just a symbolic act that they do to show that they're sorry in the prison. They light a candle for their victim to say sorry and to show that they're sorry. And it's a very moving thing to see. But for us as the Lord's people, there may be unforgiveness. Even now as I'm speaking, there may be somebody in your mind that you can think of, or a situation where you need to forgive. You know, the Bible says we forgive those who trespass against us. You know, and it's important that we forgive. And so I just want to invite you afterwards, if anybody wants to, just light a candle to show symbolically that you will forgive whoever it is who's hurt you. You know, forgiveness is not saying that what people have done to us is okay. It wasn't all right what they did to you when they hurt you. It wasn't all right what those two men did to my son and to us. It doesn't make it all right. There are consequences. You know, there are always consequences to sin. But the forgiveness of Jesus is amazing and so wonderful and so freeing. And we need to be a body that is healthy, don't we? And we just need to keep short accounts. And if you know God's forgiveness in your life, then you know the grace of God to be able to forgive others. God doesn't give us grace in advance. He gives us on a daily basis as we need it, you know. And so thank you so much for listening so patiently. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just finish with a song, if that's all right.